Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you, sir? So nice to see you.
Oh, fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sir, we'll start in just 1 minute.
Okay, okay.
We had a lunch break and now we are continuing with the second part of our session. Professor Sp Singh from Human Biology Department. He is, I know, sir, your professional or official introduction will be done by the co-chair, that is Dr. Kiranmala, but I just wanted to take the privilege to introduce you to as a fine gentleman and a great academician. I keep meeting sir in some meetings and I always enjoy his company. And he's always very, very quick and smart. And he has got commendable work. Kiran will be highlighting that work in issues related to growth and, sports, etc. And so now over to you, Kiran. Please introduce sir to the forum.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to welcome Professor Sp Singh. He is a former Dean at Faculty of Life Sciences, Punjab University, Patiala. He has administrative experience in the capacity of Additional Guild Research, Punjab University, Patiala. He was also a former head in the Department of Human Biology, Punjab University, Patiala. He has a commendable 35 years of teaching experience in the subject of human biology to postgraduate and specialization in child growth and development. He has vast experience in editing scholarly journals and manuscripts, extensive experience in research, designing, project writing, executive population surveys in the remote areas and tribal and disadvantaged group. He has authored and edited 10 books, 136 research publications, and directed and scripted 7 educational films. His areas of expertise include anthropometric measurements, health demographic variables, and using them in epidemiological problems concerning human health, obesity, malnutrition, children's growth performance, and adaptive responses of population to various ecological zones. So once again, we welcome you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you. First of all, let me congratulate the faculty, students, and everybody, all stakeholders of Department of Anthropology, Delhi University. The department has completed 75 glorious years, and this is the time of jubilation and celebrations. We are doing it today in the form of a workshop that is KINANTHROPOMETRY and human welfare. First of all, let me thank the head of the department and convener of the workshop, Professor MP Sachdeva, organizing secretary, Shivani Chandel, chairperson of this session, K.N. Saraswati, and co-chair, Kiran Mala. Thank you very much for introducing me and saying very kind words about me. Can we start the, can I start, I'll start this PPT. Okay, the topic for today is Become Young for Sports with Anthropometric Techniques. India is moving very fast forward in the sports arena, and the greater participation of our athletes in international sports, and now the winning of laurels at international forum, especially Olympics and World Games, Asian and Commonwealth Games. So all those progress which has been made, it can be supplemented if we select children at the younger ages, and we have a repository of the future champions. The framework for selecting children, first of all, what we require in small children who are aspiring for the medals at the international forum. So we have to select the reference values from the Olympic sportsmen for their size, body composition, fat, lean body mass, somatotype. What would be the endomorphy, means fat amount, the muscles amount, and the lean body mass, like that, along with the functional capabilities of the support, what are requirements. Once we have these reference values or standard values, then we'll pick up the children and predict these variables in the child when he becomes adult. This is the most crucial aspect, that we have to recruit children and we have to predict the variables, all these variables which are important when the child becomes mature or adult, or at whatever age, which is the peak age for performance in the Olympics or the World Games. Here, we would also consider the maturity status of the child. We understand that during the adolescent period, there are all types of children, early and late maturers. So that also is an important variable which has to be understood. And especially, so that was the second and important crucial point, that we have to predict these variables in the case of the child. And ultimately, these favorable predictions.
Sir, are you sharing any screen? Do you have any PowerPoint?
Yeah.
You're not able to see anything.
Okay. Can Shivani share it?
Yes, sir, I will share it immediately.
Okay. The topic for today is Become Young for Sports. Yeah, that's fine. So for selecting the children, there is a framework, how we have to select the children. So there are three things we have to do. The first is that we have to consider the reference values, and where do we get those reference values of sportsmen in every sport. They are the best in the world, from the Olympics or World Games or Asian and Commonwealth Games. And what do we need in them? From a kinanthropometric point of view, which is only one part of the total performance of the child and the athlete, that is kinanthropometric measurements and the derivations from that. And it doesn't exclude all those other variables like the endurance, the VO2 max, and the talent, everything, because those are also required. But these kinanthropometric variables we need for is physique of the Olympic athletes, height, weight, and other variables. Ultimately, we have to predict these variables. If they are suitable prediction equations, we can go ahead with it. If it is not, then we have to make those prediction equations in order to predict the adult height and weight, the adult somatotype of the children. And when we match these predictions with the actual reference values, whatever is matching with them, that would be the ideal, that we can go ahead with that. Next, please. Next. Okay. I have taken the reference studies from many people who have worked to study the Olympic athletes. Especially these are the studies on Olympic sportsmen by Tanner, William Ross, Barbara Heath, Carter. And earlier, there were so many other people who have studied the Olympic athletes. So we can have those reference values from them. Next, please. Why we think that physique is an important variable or an important determinant in performance in the sports? Because if we consider this somatotype, this is a somatotype triangle, and the areas on the top of the somatotype triangle is mesomorphy, that is muscles. On the base, on the left side is endomorphy or fatness, and on the right side is ectomorphy or leanness. So physique is a combination of all these three. And if we consider the weightlifters and throwers, they are located at the top of the mesomorphy. They are very, very high in mesomorphy. And the area which they represent. This is the distribution of all the sportsmen, weightlifters, and the throwing events. They are located in very small area of this heterotype triangle. That means their physiques are very similar to each other. So that is a starting point. That is an important thing. If the distribution is very large, perhaps everybody in that distribution is suitable for that sport. But if the distribution of a heterotype in the triangle is very limited or in a very small area, that reinforces our viewpoint that the physique has a very, very important role, and the persons who don't have that type of physique, maybe in them that is a limiting factor in performance. And similarly, you can have different shaded areas for the middle and long distance. The sprinters, they also have some area. So this point of view is very important, that physique has a role to play in the sports performance. That's why we have to consider the physique of the sportsman as the starting point or the reference values. Next, please. Some data. This is of the Hockey Olympics of 1976. We have some teams like New Zealand, Argentina, Kenya, Malaysia together, India, Pakistan together, and all Europeans, they have been together, put together, and all the data has been compiled that way. If you look at height, the height is upward of 174 centimeter up to 177. That is the average height. And mesomorphy in the somatotype is from 4 to 5. So minimum 4 and maximum 5, maybe upward of 4 is the best or important thing. In endomorphy of fatness, which is the first component in somatotype, the values range from 1.9 to 2.7, means roughly from 2 to 2 units to 2.5 units, we can say, for endomorphy, not beyond that. So that would be limiting their performance. Similarly, somatotype, mesomorphy and somatotype would be between 4 and 5. So that is a minimum requirement, but is required in the game of hockey. Next, please. So as we have seen that mesomorphy in the Olympians, it has a rating of between 4 and 5. Means we can say upward of 4 up to 5, or maybe a little more than 5. And if we consider the growth trajectory of children, so the normal course of development of children for fatness or endomorphy is from 11 to 20 years. It remains same. Endomorphy means fatness. Fatness from 11 to 20-year boys, it remains almost static. There is not much change. It means endomorphy remains static. It is not of a much concern in these years. When we recruit the children at 11 or 12 years and they have to go up to 20 years or become adult, so we don't consider much about the endomorphy because it would remain the same. So it should be between say around 2. That would be ideal one. But on the other side, the muscles definitely grow in size during that period from 11, 12 years to 20 years. How much amount of muscles? Minimum 1 unit up to 2 units in mesomorphy ratings, that increases. So if we have these details of the normal growth process of children and their increments during 10 years of from 11 to 20 years, then we can predict that what the child would be. So if we have to select children of 11 to 12 years of age for hockey, what should we require? That their endomorphy should be between 2 and 3. So downwards of 3, fatness from 2 up to 2.5, maybe perfect. And similarly, a mesomorphy rating of 3.5 to 4 units would be ideal, because when they grow and reach the adulthood, they would add up 1.5 unit to 2 units. And then their ultimate mesomorphy would become 4.5 units to 5 units, which is the ideal one. Next, please. Actually, fatness in Olympic athletes very small, and it is dependent upon different type of games. And we have seen that the leanest women have the minimum possible amount of fat, like 9% fat. 9% is minimum possible fat, out of which 4% is essential fat and 5% is sex-specific fat. And the Olympic women, there were some who had shown 9% of body fat only. And the leanest male Olympians, they have 5% fat, which is the bare minimum. If we consider sport-wise fat amount, then fat is found to be minimum in running events, all the different type of running, like sprinters and long and middle distance runners, along with gymnastics. In both cases, males and females, they have minimum amount of fat. But in case of hockey, we have seen already that hockey, you can have the endomorphy or fatness up to 3, between 2 and 3 units. Also, swimming and hockey, these are the fencing, swimming in males and fencing and hockey in males, but swimming and rowing in the case of females. These are the games where the fat amount is also more, comparatively more. Next, please. We were considering the maturity status of the Olympic sample. And we have seen that the Olympic swimmers at younger ages, they are advanced in bone maturity in both sexes. So what is the inference from here? That if we have to pick the children at younger ages, then we can focus on the early maturing children, that they may be best suited for swimming. But that only is when there is interest and other things, talent in them, only then those can be picked up. On the other hand, the female gymnastics, they are late in bone maturity. So it is totally opposite, that the females, the girls, those who are late maturing girls, picked up at younger ages, they can be suitable for gymnastics. Next, please. So how to proceed? That it's only not the KINANTHROPOMETRIC measurements which are required. It is first of all the natural talent in the young children that has to be spotted. And the children take up different type of sports all the time, young children. And in whatever sport they show more interest and talent, then the coaches can spot it out and they can find those. The potential supports to which the children they are aspiring for. And thereafter, the physical structure can be studied. This is the role of the anthropologist, human biologist, and KINANTHROPOMETRIST. They can study the physical structure, morphology, somatotype, and come up with whatever is there, along with the maturity status of the child. So the combined efforts are required. The sports scientist, the anthropometrist, and the coaches all are required when we have to groom the children at younger ages. Next slide, please. The maturity status, when we have to talk about this graph perhaps shows that there is a huge difference between the top line is the early maturing boys and the bottom line is the late maturing boys. And during the adolescent years, this distance, it increases, the gap increases a lot between the late and the early maturers, maybe up to 20 centimeters or 25 centimeters. There is a difference. If we actually comparing the chronological age of the child, early and late maturing, they may be apart as far as 20 centimeters. And if we consider like how much the late maturing child is late as compared to the early maturing, it may be 2 years or 3 years in other terms. So next, please. The important point in this situation would be to measure the maturity of the child. How it can be measured? There are basically two measures which are important. One is the skeletal maturity or bone maturity, and the other is the sexual maturity. Sexual maturity is not immediately important in selecting the children, because we may have to select children at much earlier ages, at 9 years or 10 years, something like that, and they might not have even started the puberty at that time. So bone maturity or bone age is rather more important. It is calculated on the basis of the maturity of the bones. Area often studied is the hand and wrist area, because when the X-rays are done, this is the exposure to hand and wrist is relatively less, and it's not the core of the body which is affected. The so all the bones, radius ulna and different bones of the hand, they are included. Although the development of the bone is continuous one, but it is broken down into 8 or 9 stages, different stages, A, B, C, D, like that. And there are scoring methods. So to each bone, the score is given, and ultimately all the scores of all different bones is compiled, and a cumulative age, bone age is assigned to that score, cumulative score. Most important methods and often used methods are TW2 and TW3. These are Tanner and Whitehouse methods. There was 1, 2, and then 3. Okay, next, please. Okay, next. This is precisely what measurements, what bones are included in the maturity, measuring the maturity, skeletal maturity. So it includes the radius and ulna. These are the long bones, and then all the carpals, 7 or 8, and ultimately metacarpals and phalanges. All these bones, they are included. Next, please. How the development of bone is studied in the X-ray. This is a picture of a developing child. Means the bone has not completely become an adult bone, it is growing. And there is a dark area, which is epiphyseal plate, or this is the growing plate. Ultimately, when the bone becomes an adult one, this area, it becomes calcified, and there is no more growing area, and the bone cannot increase in size after that. And on the top is the epiphyseal center. Initially, the epiphyseal centers are very small, and they keep on growing. Ultimately, they grow in size rather more than the size of the metaphysis. And that's why you must have seen the ends of the bones, they are swollen. They are larger than the shaft of the bones. Next, please. Adult height prediction. This point has been taken from Tanner and Whitehouse, whatever their atlas on the skeletal maturity of the British children. What requirements are there? The present height of the child, age of the child, and bone age of the child means skeletal age of the child. Then the increment of height in the previous year. That is that how much the child has grown during the last year. And the predictions are quite often very, very accurate if these are done at 12 years or after 12 years of age. Next, please. This is only an illustration which has been given by the Tanner and Whitehouse. This is an equation for adult height prediction. But this is not that everyone has to use this. Every different type of population may have different equations, and it is the job of the scientist to design, maybe fine-tune this equation or make totally different equations, new equations. So next, please. On the basis of this equation, we just calculated the adult height in the case of 2 children, 2 boys. You see both the boys, they are 11 years of age. They have same height as 140 centimeter. And also they have same height increment during the last year. That is 5 centimeter. But they are only different in one. So you can imagine there are two boys standing before you. They are of 11 years of age. They both have the same height, 140 centimeter. Both have the height increment during the last year as 5 centimeters. But their bone ages are different, say the skeletal ages on the basis of the x-rays of the hand and wrist when we have seen. One, in the case A, the skeletal age is 9, means bone age is 9 years. And in case 2, it is 13 years. And ultimately, when the height is predicted with that equation, in case A, where the skeletal or bone age is 9 years, it is 176.5 centimeter would be the adult height. Whereas in case 2, it would be 170.5 centimeters. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, this is an extension of the last slide. So we have case A in which 176.5 would be the adult height. Now it is 140 centimeter. We don't know that when he becomes adult, what he would be. But as per these equations, he would be 176 and the other would be 170. And as we have seen earlier, if you remember, the height of the hockey players, Olympic hockey players, was between 174 up to 177. We can take that a little further because upwards from 175 to 180 centimeter would be, say, an ideal height. But here in this case, the child who has to make the adult height up to 176.5 would be ideal one, and the other may not be suited. If we are able to give this type of opinion and judgments about the child, then perhaps the children may be saved from future setbacks when they can take up the game and they are not in a position to go up to that level simply because of the situation of their bodies, like physique or the height or something like this. Next, please. In the case of maturity, we can take, in the case of girls, the peak height velocity, and boys also the peak height velocity. That is an important indicator. What we have to take, we can take the age at peak height velocity. So whenever there is an initiation of adolescent spurt, like starting the increase in the height velocity and ultimately peaking it at some age. So that is an important point, because after that there would be decline in the velocity, and the years after that, when the child has to grow after that, are very limited, and the increase is quite limited. Maybe after 1 year, 1 year after peak height velocity, the menarche comes, and if we take the menarche as another indicator, after menarche, the development of the body maturity and the other things is a very, very small time to go further. They would be increasing in height to a small extent. Similarly, their body shape and structure would also not change too much, because they are totally on a decline on the situation of the height growth. And the same is the case with other parameters of the body. Next, please. We talked about the two methods of assessing the skeletal maturity of children, TW2 and TW3. TW3 was designed roughly 50 years after the first one was designed, and the X-rays were taken during the 1950s in the first study, and maybe around 2000 when the second study was conducted on the British children especially. And we have seen that there is a lot of difference in the maturity of the children, and this is the effect of the say secular trends, that the development had become faster. The children are maturing earlier. Especially earlier, it was 18.2, and now it is 16.5. That is the maturity, ultimate bone maturity takes place. When Tanner studied during 1950s, the children, British children, they were becoming mature at the age of 18.2 years. And when they studied those same children, not same children, but the British children, during around 2000 year, the ultimate maturity was around 16.5 years. So there is a huge difference. So all this difference, it comes into the performance as well. And in designing the research, that how we have to pick the children, especially on the basis of these. Next, please. We conducted a study on the skeletal maturity of children. There were normal or control. Normal means those who are not participating in sports and others who were participating in the school games. And we have found out that when we compare the children, those who are sports and those who are control, then there was a lot of difference, means difference of 1.5 years or even 2 years in the skeletal age. This is a graph of the skeletal age of the children, which is plotted against the actual age, chronological age. And the difference is more, especially during the adolescent years. It indicates that the sports boys, they are advanced in maturity as compared to the control boys. Next, please. We wanted to see whether the performance in the sports boys is mainly because of their advanced maturity, or is it because of some inherent factor? So what we have done is that we have compared the similar, like compared the skeletal ages, and first we compared the chronological ages. We have made chronological ages same in the boys, and the blue color is the matched chronological ages, and it shows the difference in height between the control and the sports boys. It is 4 centimeters, 6 centimeters, 7.5 centimeters during adolescent years. This is a great difference. But when we compare the children as per matched skeletal ages, which is in pink color, then it shows the differences are narrowing down. At 13 years, it is 1.5, then 2.5 and 4.5. You can see the difference, that the difference has narrowed down quite a bit as compared to their actual ages. In actual ages, the differences are more in height, but when the matched skeletal ages are taken, then the differences in height are smaller. That means the performance of the sports boys is more primarily because of their maturity status and no other factor, mainly. Next, please. So all this leads us to the point that we should take the children at young ages and study their anthropometry, kinanthropometry, physique, and maturity status. And then we can find out to which supports these children they are suited. And then we can recruit them. But first of all, it is the talent which is more important. So this was the idea which I wanted to present. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, sir, for a wonderful presentation. Actually, the topic itself was very interesting, and it was very smart topic. Pick them young for sports.
Okay,
Very smart one. I was really
Okay.
interested. I was looking forward to listen to you today. And
Okay.
I mean, whatever doubts I was getting, they were cleared in the next slide. So there was so much of clarity in your presentation, sir. Thank you so much. And though there are not many questions or anything in the chat box, if anybody wants to ask any questions, sir is there. At least those who are working in this field, please. All students working in this field, anthropometry, your sir is there. You can ask any question if you have. Well,
May I ask a question?
please, sir, please.
I'm Charles, a retired assistant professor from Sports Authority of India. Been working in this field for past 35 years.
Yes.
And I am also an ISAK trainer, level 3 trainer, got training from Mexico.
Hello.
And, sir, it was very interesting, and as you, Madam Saraswati said, it was very specific and clear about the concepts and selection process, identification, everything. And I congratulate, sir, a very good effort and study done on this area. my question to you is, for spot identification, you have taken only few variables like height, prediction of height and all. Now, my question is how much the body proportions can tell you a future athlete or a specific sport, athlete selection for a specific sport. Make it more clear, say for his limb length or sitting height, because these requirements are specific for there are certain selected sports. Not like basketball, volleyball, and have a common thing. And of course, for presentation, you have selected hockey, it is fine, you stick down to that. And so it became very clear and transparent in understanding. So my question is, how much important the scientists or the coaches or the KINANTHROPOMETRIsts give attention towards the proportions, body proportions?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you. The body proportions are more important, very, very important, especially when we have been studying the natural differences in body proportions than the African American athletes. They rather have proportionately longer legs, and they reign the area. They are the kings of the area of hurdles. Also the sprinting mainly, but it's not exclusively, we can't say that. That point is quite important, and we have been studying the different proportion, body proportion, and the one important proportion, as you mentioned, is the sitting height versus the lower leg length, lower extremity length.
The arm span.
Yeah, arm span also, yeah, these are also very important. So nobody is of the opinion that these are not important. The only thing was it was a very specific and small issue which I wanted to discuss. But I fully agree with you that there are multitude of measurements on which the work can be done, and those can be included. And our scientists, they have to study, especially the maturity status, whatever different types are there of studying the maturity of the child, then they must consider that. Because in age-based competitions, we have seen that the adolescent champions, they are nowhere there when they become adults, simply because of their early maturity status.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Professor Saraswati, may I? Myself is Arup. How are you, sir?
Oh, fine, fine. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Nice meeting you, sir.
Oh,
nice meeting you, sir.
Okay. Yes.
After a long
welcome.
time, you know.
Yeah. Yes.
So really, I was because this is your area that for a long time you are working on this particular kinanthropometry and sports anthropology. So nothing to say about it, but just 2 points I would like to talk about. One thing is you have talked about this maturity. So can we take dental maturity, I mean dental eruptions as a point anytime, as the permanent dental eruptions can have a point of getting a dental, I mean the maturity of the boys and girls together. And number 2 is this, we have gone through lots of sports, and what about the gymnastics? What we find that when the girls reach in the gymnastics, puberty in the gymnastics, most of the times they used to fail having this performance. If you think 10 out of 10 performance by Nadia Comaneci, you know, from the Romania, so it was always we find that it's lesser than the puberty. Is it that the puberty stature makes some kind of problem in the gymnastic sports? Now, I'm not talking about the sports in the field sports, but the gymnastic when the height is higher. So do they get some kind of balance problem? So this is all open to everybody if somebody can, because I'm very much interested to know about it, because whenever I have seen this kind of in Olympics, we find the ages are so low, you know, it's 10 up to 10 or 11. And when they achieve the height, I mean the puberty, then sometimes I find they are not achieving 10 out of 10. So is there any kind? Otherwise, ethnicity is there. If you think about that long distance runners are coming from Africa and they are not performing well in the swimming, might be the bone density or other kind of things, that is the ethnic groups analysis. So this is really an interesting subject that India should take up in the point, and I'm very much happy that 2 of my students are here. One is Dr. Priyanka Das. He worked She works sometimes in the Sai Bangalore, and I feel her supervisor is there to tell something today itself. And another is Dr. Deepthi Mondal. She is still now working in the Sai and the Sports Authority of India, and she did her PhD on the sports anthropometry. So I feel that in some of the time they will be asking some kind of observation. Thank you so much for giving me this.
Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. The first.
I'm here, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay. The first question which you asked about was dental maturity, and dental maturity. I think it's very tricky because except for molars, when we molar 3, if we exclude molar 3, which may be impacted in majority of the children these years, and may not be coming out and can be seen. So up to the other, all dentition, it is complete by almost 11 years and 12 years. Okay, if we have to pick a little earlier ages, maybe it is important, but if we have to go a little beyond 12 years, 11 or 12 years, then it may not be of a much consequence because the dental maturity, the permanent dentition, it's complete, almost complete by 11 years or like that. And second point, like, I don't know, but that lady Biles earlier in gymnastics, US gymnast, may not be forgetting her name, Biles or something like that, Biles. She is more than 20 years, 24 years, 23, 24 years. She has been excelling, but now, okay, she didn't perform much here in the latest Olympics. But the age of the female gymnastic athletes is increasing rather. Earlier, it was not so. And maybe because this is the important thing which has been come to the notice that the late maturing girls, they are actually excelling in the game of gymnastics. And when they are, say, taking the sport like they say a 15-year-old girl sportsman for gymnastics, if she is a late maturer, maybe just equal to 11 or 12-year other child who is early maturer. So the girls who are taking to gymnastics and with late puberty and late maturity, maybe they are picked up simply because of that fact or factor. And because one important thing is that the calcification of the bones and complete bone maturity should not be there earlier when the bones are less developed, maybe not 100% developed. Like in bone maturity, we have seen that the adult stage or complete skeletal maturity is seen at the age of 18 years earlier, then they may not have the skeletal maturity at the same ages, maybe a little delayed. And that may be suitable for the game of gymnastics, but I'm not sure. This is just a speculation or a speculative viewpoint.
No, thank you so much, because you are working just, if somebody walks with this one, so might be the segmental measurements. I mean, the subastial leg length and the sitting height vertex. Maybe something that is comparable with this one, because they have to revolve and other kind of things. Maybe the center of gravity can make some kind of things. I do not know, but I have
swimmers
interest on that.
Yeah, for example, swimmers.
On that. Why?
For example, swimmers should have more trunk and core area, because the legs are just a drag for them. So there should be shorter legs as compared to the rest of the body, like the trunk length should be relatively much more as compared to the subastial length in the case of swimmers. That is an important point which has come to the notice of many people.
Right. That's why I said that if the people coming from Africa is not making themselves excels in the swimming, but the people are coming from the Asian region and the US, there might be some body compositions and other kind of things, because you have to float and you should not be very much wet and other kind of things. Anyway, so these are the things that
can I just interfere with? Mr. Arup has raised a very good point on gymnastics. You said the bone maturity, late bone maturity is good for gymnastics. One thing we have noticed that the peak performance comes at the age of 14. Even Nadia Comaneci had a 10 out of 10 at the age of 14. But unfortunately, the gymnasts cannot prolong their performance as In the case of cricket, people are playing up to 40 years of age, or 35 years of age. But here, the observation is that they have got a very short span of peak performance that stage. So that may be the reason. It can be a point where somebody can research on that area. Mr. Arup has given a very good, valid point on that. Thank you very much.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, the participants. Really, it was a very enlightening discussion. And sir, there are few comments in the chat box, though there are no questions. I'll just read out the comments for you, sir. Thanks for an informative session by Singh sir. Informative session. Please share the PPT if possible. Nice presentation. Very informative and detailed presentation, sir. Thank you so much for this amazing talk. So these are the congratulatory messages, in fact.
Okay,
and sir, I mean, I'm not from this field, so I'm asking you like a lay woman, one small question. In the last lecture, Professor Elena was talking about the secular trends, and now you are talking about the picking of people at early age. I'm just confused, or I just want to ask you, would the secular trend affect the speaking? I mean, do you think even there are aged menarche is decreasing, like like height is increasing, IQ is increasing, whatever it is, there is definitely a change from one generation to another generation. So if you have certain standards now, how long will they be valid? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it is a relevant question also. I just want to ask you, sir.
Yeah, madam, this is a very, very relevant question, in fact. Generally, they say that the standards for growth, judging the growth and maturity of children should be roughly a decadal standards after 10 years or so. But ultimately, we are not sure when these secular trends would come to a halt, because these are narrowing down. They were earlier, they were very, very huge, especially during the 19th century and 20th century. But now these differences are becoming smaller and smaller. But the world is not a uniform one. The countries which are disadvantaged ones, they still have a lot of scope for the improvement in the people's and children's health. Therefore, the secular trends would be more as compared to the Western world in the case of developing nations. So definitely it has a role. And for picking up children at younger ages, now if the development is becoming faster, means maturity is becoming faster, then the children has to be picked up much, much earlier at younger ages. So that is an important point for linking the secular trends with the selection of the children at earlier ages.
Thank you so much, sir. We are well in time. It's just 5 minutes are left, but I don't think anybody has any question. I think only teachers have questions. Students are always with answers. Anyway, thank you very much, sir, once again. And I thank all the participants.
Okay,
and
thank
once
you from
again,
my side. Okay, thank you.
I once again congratulate the organizers, Dr. Shivani Chandel, and also Professor MP Sachideva, our head of the department. And I think we can close the session, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Elena and Professor Singh, for such a wonderful and enlightening session. Session 2 has come to an end. I thank our eminent speakers. I thank our chair and co-chair for this session. Thank you, ma'am. Now I welcome Ms. Sohini Sinha, who would be moderating session 3. Thank you. Over to you, Sohini.
Am I audible?
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah. Good afternoon, all. I welcome you for the third session of the day for today's international workshop on KINANTHROPOMETRY and human welfare. I would like to welcome the chair of the session, Professor Bendrithing More. Professor Bendrithing More is a professor of physical anthropology in Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Teaches paper on human evolution and variations, human genetics, demography, biodiversity, and also supervises research students. His main area of interest includes demography and human genetics. Now I welcome our co-chair, Dr. Suniti Yadav. Dr. Suniti Yadav is an assistant professor in Department of Anthropology, University of
Sohini, I think Suniti is not here. She could not come due to some emergency. So I will be co-chairing the session with her.
So I welcome our co-chair, Dr. Shivani Chandil. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is afternoon in India, and I welcome you to this final and third session of KINANTHROPOMETRY and Human Welfare Workshop. In this session, we have two speakers, and the first speaker will be Professor Barry Baldwin, and the second speaker is an alumni of our department, Dr. Ethany Redso. And I would like to introduce the first speaker. Professor Barry Baldwin is a professor emeritus of biological anthropology in the School of Sport, Exercise, and Health Sciences at Loughborough University, UK. And he will be talking on the topic social, economic, political, emotional factors regulate human growth. And Professor Baldwin received his PhD in anthropology from Temple University in 1977. He was professor of anthropology at University of Michigan, Dearborn from 1982 to 2007. Formerly, he was also assistant professor at Wayne State University and also a visiting professor at Universidad del Valladolid in Guatemala. And he is an expert in human physical growth and development, nutritional ecology, evolutionary biology and life history theory, and human adaptation and evolution of pattern of human growth. More recently, Professor Baldwin has been studying migration, nutrition, and aging and bone health of Bangladeshi women living in UK and in Bangladesh. And also, he has been conducting exercise interventions to promote better health in UK Bangladeshi women. His long research has been published in as many as 11 books and more than 230 articles in journals of high repute. Professor Baldwin is also a recipient of the University of Michigan Distinguished Faculty Research Award, the Distinguished Teaching Award, and the Michigan Association of Governing Boards Distinguished Faculty Award. In 2004, Professor Baldwin was awarded the William E. Stearden Professorship, the highest academic honor of the University of Michigan Dearborn. That was in 2006. That was in 2004. And in 2006, he was elevated to Professor Emeritus. And Professor Baldwin still remains very active in mentoring students and younger colleagues. And he has a number of research collaborations in Spain, Germany, Guatemala, Mexico, and other countries. We are very much honored to have you, sir. And the Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi, very warmly welcome you. And sir, this is a 45-minute lecture, which will be followed by discussion and interaction. And now I invite Professor Barry Baldwin for a lecture. Sir, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murray, for that very kind and flattering introduction. Good afternoon. I'm very honored to be here, and we'll get right to my talk. So I will share my screen with you. And can you see my title slide?
Yes, sir.
Yes, good. All right. So Let me just make sure everything is prepared well here. Yes. And we're ready to go, I think. So again, my thanks to all my esteemed and distinguished invited colleagues, all the participants watching virtually, and especially I thank and welcome all students who to whom I really direct most of my comments, because students are the future, and I hope you will carry on the work of all of us who have come before you. So my thanks again to Dr. Murray, to Professor Sachdeva, and especially Dr. Shivani Chandel for the honor and invitation to speak with you today. And congratulations, many congratulations on your 75 glorious years as a department. So my talk, social, economic, and political factors regulate human growth. I'll refer to those social, economic, political, and emotional factors as SEPE, S-E-P-E. And you can see that various SEPE, social, economic, political, and emotional. Down here I have the illustration of from an infant to a baby, to a child, to a juvenile. It's not just their own emotional development, but it's the emotional environment in which they grow. And the little hearts, I like this illustration because the hearts mean love. And as we'll see a little later in my talk, love is absolutely essential for good physical growth. So I am from this university, and how do you pronounce that university? Well, you, if we get this to work, how do you pronounce that word? Dr. Murray did pronounce it correctly, Loughborough, but the locals pronounce it Loughborough, Loughborough. Aha, I'm in Loughborough. So very unusual language, this English that we speak, the O-U-G-H, O-U-G-H, two different sounds just in that one name. And someone told me there's more than a dozen ways to pronounce O-U-G-H in the English language. But where is Loughborough? Well, here it is in the center of the universe. You can see that a little town called London is about 100 miles to the south of Loughborough. And actually Nottingham is a little bit to the north, and Leicester, the city of Leicester, is a little bit to the south. So in relation to where we all are, well, had I been able to come to Delhi, it says it's a 10-hour, 15-minute flight. It would cost me close to 1,300 pounds, and I would have been with you in Delhi. And I hope that next year we can all get together face to face. So Loughborough University is a newer university in the UK, really became a university in the 1960s. It has a relatively large campus for UK universities, up to 17,000 students at the university. We are known for our sports as well as for other academic subjects, but both the academic side of sports and the practice of sports are one of the pillars of Loughborough University. I was in the School of Sport, Exercise, and Health Sciences. Although many people say I'm not such a good sport, but we'll come to that later in the talk. Loughborough has the Grand Central Canal, which prior to the railroads was an important trade and transportation route through the Midlands of the United Kingdom. And today we have a canal festival, and the canals are used mostly for recreational boating. And Loughborough was a market town. It was important more than 100 years ago for weaving and other craft work. Unfortunately, the people of Loughborough rejected the Industrial Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution passed by Loughborough, went to Birmingham. Had Loughborough accepted industrialization, perhaps Loughborough would be the Birmingham of the United Kingdom, but that was not to be. All right, so that's where I'm located currently. So growth is a target-seeking function. that is a phrase that Professor James Tanner used in 1963 in one of his famous articles published in Nature. At that time, Tanner thought that the target, so if we think of growth, if this is age and this is size, or whether it's height or weight or any other measure, the individual goes towards a predetermined genetic target. At least that was the idea back in 1963. And Tanner thought maybe it was not a size in centimeters per se for height, but maybe the genetic target was the size of some fundamental tissue or organ, such as the heart. And then the rest of the body would just grow towards that target. Conrad Waddington, earlier in 1957, published his book, The Strategy of Genes, and he coined the term epigenetic, which is all the rage today, epigenetic factors in everything, growth and health and disease. And Waddington focused on the pull of genes and their interactions with environments. Professor Tanner also, of course, noted the importance of the environment. But today we've gone beyond this sort of gene by environment interaction to understand that everything about human growth and development, and here we have a tremendous range of height and body size and shape from some very tall individuals at this end. Most of the people here are celebrities, actors, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Barack Obama, and some actors and celebrities down here with well-known growth disorders, variation both of men and of women. Here is just to remind us all that the normal heights come in a tremendous range of variation. This is just one curve I took from the internet, less than 130 centimeters to more than 174. But we know that human height in healthy, well-nourished individuals can vary from less than 150 centimeters to greater than 200 centimeters in any human, I say breeding population, as we are biological anthropologists, in any group that is, sharing genes with each other. There's just tremendous phenotypic plasticity in height. So the notion that we grow to a specific target begins to fade as we consider this huge range of variation. We know that today there are very tall people, and just to focus on women, this is a photograph from Latvia, several very tall women. The average height of adult women in Latvia is 170 centimeters. Here's another Latvian woman, a little less tall. In a country, Western European country, Portugal, the average height of adult women is 163 centimeters. So there you see a pretty big range. And if we go elsewhere in the world, for instance, in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, where I work, where some of our colleagues work, I think my colleague Sudeep Databanik is listening in from Yucatan just now. The average height of Maya women is 148 centimeters. Here's an example from some of my field work in the Yucatan. This grandmother is 142 centimeters. This is her granddaughter. And my colleague, Dr. Inês Mirella Silva, the tall woman in this picture, is Portuguese. She's 159 centimeters. So tallness, shortness, and the range of variation is real and absolute. Tallness and shortness are relative to different communities. And I will speak about community effects in just a few moments. We know that height changes over time. I believe my colleague from Japan, Dr. Takashi Satake, is also listening in. And the Japanese secular trend in growth is one of the most famous and startling. So we have here data from as far back as 1870s up to the 1880s. And you can see both for boys, the blue is boys, that means male or boys, girls. And here for girls, we see a steady trend upward in height from the late 19th century through the late 20th century. Students are always taller than the general population, often military conscripts measured here, and national growth studies from about 1920 onward. But over time, the general population, both for boys and girls, has converged on the more privileged university students. These are adult heights. So we see these secular trends. If growth were really a genetic target, why would we have these trends? Well, we know that environmental change is important, but we still don't understand really everything that has propelled the secular trend towards greater height over the past century or century and a half. We know that it's during this period, the late 1930s, 1940s up to 1950, this is the time of World War II. You would think that this would be a time of terrible living conditions and perhaps the slowest increases in height because the population was in a war mode. Many foods and other important resources for healthy growth and development were in short supply, yet we see that this is the period of greatest change in height. And we need to explain why that would be, why during a period of warfare, there would be the greatest increase in height for both boys, or young adult men and young adult women. So we come to this, get rid of this. Oh, I can't see to get rid of it. We come to this newer conception of growth and development. The growth take place not towards a target, but rather within a very large phenotypic frame. So this little frame right here would represent tallness or shortness or thinness or fatness or relatively, to use somatotyping, ectomorphic or mesomorphic or endomorphic somatotypes. We know that it's the history of the mother and the father that contribute to the genetic and epigenetic makeup of the fertilized ovum. And then that fertilized single cell becomes a trillion cells as a fetus. The genes that we have are the genes that make us human. And those genes are shared by all humans throughout time and throughout the world today. So it's not genes that are making us grow in any particular size, rather genes make us human. But how we're treated after birth as infants, children, juveniles, adolescents, and how the biological and cultural environment in which we live influences us, what I call our lens of biocultural plasticity, that is refracting the trajectories of growth towards these different areas of this very large phenotypic frame. Our total ecology, nutritional ecology, health ecology, financial ecology, everything is super important. The families in which we live, and I say families because it's not just mother, father, and offspring, but our extended families, both vertically and horizontally, and the local community in which we live, which may include biological family members, social family members, friends, and others that we interact with. These are all important. Of course, the neuroendocrinology, the neuroendocrinology of our ecology is super important. This is really what controls growth. The neurological and endocrine interactions that regulate hormonal production and secretion are what ultimately cause growth. And something I'll talk about a bit later, community effects in growth, all are part of this lens of biocultural plasticity that refracts our trajectories towards different regions of the phenotypic frame. So I use the term SEPE, social, economic, political, emotional, instead of using the traditional SES, socioeconomic status. I've written a great deal about social economic status in my previous research. I've adopted the use of the word SEPE, social, economic, political, and emotional, because SEPE relates to the individual and to the group in which that individual lives. And SEPE more accurately captures the concept of prestige, the original conception of socioeconomic status by a psychologist. I'll think of his name in just a moment, just flashed out of my head. But the original conception of socioeconomic status was about prestige, not really about economic and education as it's used today. We usually calculate SES as some combination of father and or mother's education level and occupation. But Cattell, Raymond Cattell, the psychologist who first defined socioeconomic status as a social science concept, talked about prestige. SEPE really captures that prestige. It captures social identity. Where do you belong in the social hierarchy? What are your motivations, your self-motivations, your ego motivations, and also your task motivation? In sports psychologists talk a great deal about ego motivation to win and task motivation to perform well within your team and sport community. Winning is not everything. Personal winning is not everything. Sometimes you must sacrifice yourself for the good of the group. These kinds of prestige and social identity factors influence your social position in the social hierarchy, your position of dominance or subordination. And those same factors influence our position of dominance and subordination in communities. Overriding all of this is the larger set of material and moral conditions of the society. It was Professor Tanner in his 1986 article about secular trends and how the more material and moral conditions of societies influence those secular trends. When material and moral conditions are better for everyone, everyone gets taller. When they're worse, everyone grows less well. Now, I write about all of this, and you can read more about it in a paper published earlier this year in the new journal, Human Biology and Public Health, in volume 1. And I'm proud to be the first article in volume 1. It's open access. You can either search Google Human Biology and Public Health or use this link to download this article and all other articles from this open access journal. And it's the journal of the Oxological Society, to which some people speaking today belong, such as Professor Elena Godina. All right, so let's talk about SEPE. And sorry that I can't seem to get rid of this. Oh, so first, I want to talk about the social aspects of SEPE, social aspects and height. Here we have two good friends, as you can see here. You might know Mr. Clooney, the taller actor here, and Danny DeVito. These are their approximate heights. They can be good friends, even though they are quite different in size. But do these men have strong ties? Did they have strong social ties when they were growing up? And did it influence their height in any way? Well, in fact, we know that Danny DeVito has a growth disorder. I don't remember the exact medical name, but his short height for a man is due to that factor. I don't really want to talk about the friendship of these two men, but I want to talk about social interactions that all of us have in our daily lives. Here is an article by Geert Stulp in the Netherlands. Human height is positively related to interpersonal dominance in dyadic relationships. And as the authors say, across cultures, taller stature is linked to increased social status. This has been well known for a long, long time, back into the 1800s. But the reasons for why this should occur are still unclear. One potential explanation is that taller individuals are more likely to win in dyadic confrontations. What they did in this study was they had taller or shorter researchers interfere with people in public spaces, such as trying to get through a doorway in a shop or some other building. And more often than not, the shorter person, man or woman, would give way to the taller person, whether that person was man or woman. So, as is well known, there is a height advantage. Taller men and women often win in these kinds of relationships. Taller men and women often have social advantages that relate to economic, political opportunities. For example, in this study by Bellamy and colleagues, they talk about the social advantage of miscalibrated individuals. So what is the relationship between social class and overconfidence? In their article, they do a path analysis, and what they're interested is in how a company, somebody doing interviews to hire a potential worker for a company, how that person rates the applicant. And they found that social class is important. Social class can lead, higher social class can lead to overconfidence, but overconfidence can lead to perceived competence. Social class itself, when it can be detected through many means, how people dress, how people speak, the schools they attended, perhaps who their parents are, that all influenced hiring decisions. We know that higher social class is associated with greater height. What we don't know is how height also relates to not just hiring decisions. We know that the taller of two candidates, man or woman, the taller of two candidates for a job is usually preferred, especially in jobs where the applicant will have to interact with the public, such as in sales positions. But what we don't know is how that overconfidence and perceived competence and social advantages, in fact, promote greater height itself. So some of the arrowheads should be pointing in the other direction, is what I'm saying. That height should be pointing towards social class, because we know from previous studies in Europe and elsewhere that the taller of two brothers and the taller of two sisters from the same family, the taller siblings tend to move up in social class higher than their father and mother, and the shorter tend to stay in the same social class as their mother and father or move downward. So there is a complex and constant interaction between biology of height and the social, economic, and political and emotional factors that influence height. All right, so that's a little bit on the social side. Let's look at the economic and political aspects of height. This illustration is called History's Growing Pains, is a very simplified cartoon of secular trends. 21st century Australian, averaging about 178 centimeters, in fact, is no taller than a 30,000-year-old upper Paleolithic Cro-Magnon hunter-gatherer. So we were taller in the past, and we know that heights decreased, especially with the advent of what we call civilization. Because with civilization, mainly with agriculture, with settling down in one place, with farming, we also developed social classes. There were higher and lower social classes, and we know throughout history that the leaders, the higher social classes throughout the ancient kingdoms of the world were taller than the peasants, the serfs, the workers of the world. All of this reached the nadir, perhaps in the Middle Ages, 1500 AD, and I don't really like this one, that the 19th century factory worker was not necessarily taller than middle-aged peasants. In fact, many studies show that 19th century factory workers during the Industrial Revolution in England and elsewhere in Europe were smaller than European peasants because of the terrible living conditions. Secular trends have continued. The tallest people in the world today are sometimes considered to be the Dutch. They're just a few millimeters taller than Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, and other parts of Northern Europe, but about 184 centimeters. And we are beginning to know why some countries are so much taller than other countries. And it's because of economic and political factors that lead to what economists call a low Gini index. The Gini coefficient, named after an Italian economist, Carlo Gini, in the 1920s, is a measure of how different incomes are. When everybody earns the same amount, there is no difference. So it is a very low Gini index. When one person earns all the money and the rest of us earn no money, then it is a perfect separation of money, and it's a very high Gini index. So here we have on this y-axis what is called the Gini W. It's a Wagstaff, an economist named Wagstaff, who has modified the Gini index a little bit for the modern day situation. So up here, a very high Gini, meaning a lot of income disparity, and here low Gini index. The arrow points to the Netherlands, which has a very low Gini index. Taxation policies, this is a political decision, taxation policies in the Netherlands and corporate salary policies in the Netherlands assure that the CEO of a company makes only a certain percentage above that of the lowest paid worker. Whereas in the United States or the UK, the CEO of the company may earn 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 times that of a worker. That's not the case in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is also the tallest people on the planet, as I said. And you can see that what we did in this article published a few years ago with several colleagues is we calculated for 126 different nations of the world. Each square here is a nation, or each circle. The squares represent a regression analysis done with the Gini index, the circles with gross national income. So of course, as gross national income goes up, height goes up. Here we have height of men along the x-axis. This is the gross national income. Height does go up with greater gross national income. People have more money, can buy more things, better medical systems, height does go up. But you can also see that as the Gini goes down, which means income is more equal, height goes up. And the Gini factor explains more of the variation in height than does how much money is earned in the country. The Gini factor alone explains 22% of the variation in height in this sample of 100 and I think it's 26 nations. And that is a greater percent of variation than is explained just by gross national income. So political decisions which affect the material and moral conditions of the society are greater influences on height than just money. That's why I put political and economic together. Same thing for women. Greater percentage of height variation is explained as Gini goes down, you have greater height. By the way, this black circle for men here encompasses the United States, the island nation of Grenada in the Caribbean, and the Russian Federation. So local politics and geography hardly mean anything. All these countries share the same Gini index and are shorter than the Netherlands. Okay, same here. For women, Gini explains more than money in their pocket. So some years ago, I knew how to remove this, remove control. Well, no, can't get rid of it. Sorry about that. And a few years ago with my very good colleagues, Michael Hermanussen and Christian Scheffler, were in Germany, and I published an article about determinants of body height. And we talked about the classic interpretations of genetics, nutrition, and hygiene, health, sometimes called water and sanitation or WASH, interacting with traditional socioeconomic status, wealth, socioeconomic circumstances, occupations, career choice, choice of your partner in life. These interact. That's the classic ideas that lead to a target height. But we talk about relative optimum height within the group in which you live. And we talk about, in addition to the classic factors, we talk about the group of peers with whom you live, that there's an average height of your group. And nobody wants to be average, but in fact, nobody wants to be too far away from the average. Nobody wants to be unusual. And that goes for height as well as for social behavior. Several analyses that have been done in various parts of the world show that groups tend to conform to an average height. And it's during adolescence that boys and girls adjust their rate of growth to better conform to the average height of their group. So we have a peer group average height. Dominance and subordination interacts with that peer group tendency to create greater variation. And all of this is regulated by interactions between growth hormones, such as insulin-like growth factor 1, which promotes growth, and then also stress hormones like cortisol, which delay or prevent growth. So there's very complex neuroendocrine interactions. And all of these factors lead to community effects on growth within the group. We're not forgetting about genetics and nutrition and WASH. These are only biological prerequisites. That's what's needed to stay alive. If you only have those, you grow very poorly indeed. You need other factors to grow well. So let's talk about community effects. Everybody lives in a community. Here we have ego, you or me. We have parents, we have siblings, we have other members of our family. That's this R1 clustering right here, and R2 clustering of the family. So households and families are part of our community, but we also live in neighborhoods. We, as children, attend schools. That's another community. Those communities can interact. And then there's the larger community of the school, the neighborhood, and the society in which we live. And there are all these complex interactions that have biological and social and political and economic and emotional impacts on us. As we get older, we move from the household and family out to these other neighborhoods and communities and experience more of these interactions. We know that these kinds of social networks are part of our lives. So at one level of our life, we experience the social network. We know from very well conducted biomedical, sociological research that there are disease networks that conform with our social networks. So we know that there are social networks that can predict your risk of obesity or diabetes or asthma. And we know that these disease networks ultimately are based on metabolic networks operating within our bodies. So why not take the next step and talk about not disease networks, but things like height variation as part of a social network. Height, after all, is the function of biological processes and social processes. We know that. So why not a function of social networks? And that's what we've been doing in our research. who you are, how you grow is part of your social network. When things don't go well, when you experience adversity from social pressure, from racism, from poverty, from ethnocentrism, we know that that is causing harmful, toxic stress. And we know that when toxic, harmful stress is chronic, you're facing this every day, the problems of poverty and racism, they don't go away just because you want them to. They don't go away just because you go to school. They don't go away just because you get a job. People will target you with their biases no matter what. Those kinds of toxic, chronic stresses, we know have an impact on the hormones that regulate growth and will delay growth. Toxic stress delays growth. We begin to understand the community effect of height from this perspective, that good, welcoming environments in which people have social dominance and confidence and respect, that causes good growth. In communities of the opposite, with bias and racism and poverty, poor growth. So in this drawing, which comes from my colleague Michael Hermanuson, the community effect, you see the closer you are to a particular community, the closer in size you are to the members of that community. If you belong to a privileged community, you will grow better. If you belong to a suffering community, you will grow less well, but you will conform to the community. The greater your distance from that community, social, emotional, geographical, economic distance, the more variation you'll have. So up here, again, we would have one community which is benefiting from privileges, and this community is suffering. Within the community, we would have less variation. And here we can use this community effect to help explain secular trends. Remember the Japanese case. Over time, people are converging on the same average height. The university students and the general population converge. And the same happens in men and women. Why? Because it was during that war period in Japan when social barriers between rich and poor began to break down, when opportunities for the poor opened up as Japan industrialized and urbanized and people got better educations. So as you get better educations, as there is more democracy in the ideal sense of that word, with revolution, when the lower classes believe they can, through revolution, move upwards, with migration and greater self-confidence, you get what we call strategic growth adjustments, mostly during adolescence, where the lower and the upper classes converge, as opposed to feudal societies. And Japan was a feudal society prior to World War II, where you get great differences in height and social class between the rich and the poor. So we're getting a better handle on what regulates secular trends as well as individual growth with this Sp concept. Here we have revolution, the French Revolution, and viva la révolution. When the lower social strata start to believe in dominance, when they believe that they can get bigger, they actually grow physically. We see this throughout Europe in the 19th century and the early 20th century. When upper social classes are intimidated by the lower social classes, they also grow. So we have the upward trend of both lower and upper social classes. We have the secular trend. As I said, the Northern European countries can serve as a model for this. And the Dutch are the tallest of all in the world today. In the year 1900, the Dutch were the shortest in Western Europe. But their social, economic, political revolutions, perhaps not as violent as in some other countries, but nevertheless, they were social, economic, political revolutions, resulted in tall stature. Finally, I want to talk about emotions and height. The E of Sp. Here is a classic case of emotional deprivation and lack of growth. No love, failure to thrive, no growth. These are infants who were orphaned in the early part of the 20th century, and they did not grow. Most, in fact, died, as Doctors Chapin, Balkin, and Spitz wrote about as early as 1915, infants that went into institutions, foundling homes. If they were under 2 years of age, virtually all of them died. They received good care, but notice the nurses are wearing masks. They don't get any emotional contact. The nurses had so many babies to take care of. They didn't talk to them. They didn't play with them. They just took care of their physical needs, not their emotional needs. And the infants failed to grow, and most died. Psychosocial short stature is a well-known medical condition. Pediatricians around the world know about it. This is a case from Texas in the United States in 2012. There was a custody battle for the children of a family. A girl here is 9 years of age. The boy is 11. It's her older brother. He was most impacted by the divorce and the very toxic, chronic, emotional environment of the family during the custody battle. And he just stopped growing. Unfortunately, we know of many, many such cases such as this. Psychosocial short stature. And we know that the brain, the hypothalamus, just stops making growth hormone, or somewhere in the growth hormone to IGF-1 cascade, there is some malfunction and growth stops. We begin to understand this when we can study non-human mammals, where we can do experiments that we just are not ethically able to do with people. So meerkats. Meerkats are lovable little animals. Here in the UK, they're used to advertise all sorts of products because they're so cute, we think. Colleagues of ours from University of Cambridge have been working with meerkats in Namibia and Southern Africa for 25 years, and they've done some of these meerkat experiments. They've shown that dominance acquisition results in growth stimulation. Meerkats are cooperative breeders. What that means is that only one male and one female in a social group reproduce, have babies. All the other meerkats, adult meerkats, help the dominant male and female, and the helpers give up reproduction. The helpers are also physically smaller than the dominant male and female. But the human researchers stimulated the growth of subordinate meerkats by giving them extra food. They gave them an extra half hard-boiled egg to eat, and that stimulated the growth of the subordinate meerkats when they were still young and growing. As those stimulated subordinate animals started to grow, that stimulated the growth of the dominant animal. So the dominants only grow as big as they have to be just a little bit bigger than their brothers and sisters. These are meerkats in the same litter, born at the same time from the same mother and father. So they're genetically very similar, like all brothers and sisters, but they grow differently. So here's an example of how the dominance status of the animals change their growth. Here is their growth. 0 represents the point where growth, where animals gained dominance in their social group. So this is before dominance, and this is after. Once they gain dominance, you can see they grow, they begin to grow eventually more than before they gain dominance, and the same with females. The fastest rate of growth is after they gain dominance. When they did the experiment, they gave extra food to what they call the challenger, and the challenger actually grew faster. This is how much the challenger grew during the period of the experiment, when the challenger was getting extra food. And this is how much more than the control, the challenged, the one who was already socially dominant, the challenged started to grow faster as well, as compared with a dominant animal who was not challenged. So just being threatened by a brother or sister who is coming up in social status makes the previously dominant brother or sister grow faster. It's not food. It's not food. These animals got the food. These animals just grew because they were socially challenged. Does this happen in people? Well, we have something in people called sibling rivalry. Of course, brothers and sisters love each other. We know that. There's never any problem in families. I'm smiling as I say that. An experiment was done here in the UK with a longitudinal study called the Avon longitudinal study of parents and their children, the ALSPAC study. It's out of the University of Bristol. And colleagues David Lawson and Ruth Mace published an article called Sibling Configuration in Childhood Growth. And what they showed was they took a control, that's individuals, these are boys and girls in the longitudinal study who had no siblings, 0 siblings, that's the control. And then they compared their growth, with families where the participant in the longitudinal study had 1 sibling or 2 or more. And you can see that as they get older, this is birth up through age 10, as they get older, individuals in the study with more siblings, here's 1, here's 2 or more, grew less. This is number of older siblings. So the study child grew less over time if he or she had an older sibling. How can we explain this? The traditional explanation is more siblings, more mouths to feed. That is, the parents only have so much money and they can only give so much resources to each of their children. And the older child gets more usually than the younger child. But this is not the case in the ALSPAC study. The ALSPAC families are all relatively wealthy. The children are all well fed. And in the society studied here in the UK, there are universal healthcare and education benefits. So it's not more mouths to feed. That can't explain up to a centimeter difference in growth over 10 years, as explained or as proposed by the number of mouths to feed. I propose, and others, sociologists and psychologists propose, that bullying is a better explanation for the height deficit. The older siblings may not do this bullying intentionally, but older siblings inflict physical and emotional stress on younger brothers and sisters. I have a link here to an article about that. And that stress, that chronic stress of being a younger sibling of subordinate status, can slow the flow of growth hormones. In fact, another study in the ALSPAC, using the ALSPAC data, showed that the best predictor of the growth of these children was their growth hormone and IGF-1 production in both boys and girls. We know chronic stress slows the production of growth hormone and insulin-like growth factor 1. So, since this conference focuses on sport, I'll end with this study we did in 2015 about sex, sport, IGF-1, and the community growth hypothesis. I just have a couple of minutes left. And what we did here at Loughborough University, some of my undergraduate students had good connections with the elite sport teams. When I say elite, they're playing at the highest level of university competition in the United Kingdom and sometimes in the world. So Loughborough has some of these very elite sport teams. We had volleyball, basketball, football, both women's and men's teams. In all, we had sample sizes about this of more than 100 individuals. What we did was we took a finger prick blood sample 24 hours before an important game, 24 hours before the team members were going to play a game. And we assayed that fingertip blood sample for IGF-1. And then we took a second blood sample 24 hours after the game, and we also assayed that for IGF-1. The assays were done at the laboratory of Professor Werner Bloom, who in fact developed the fingertip blood assay for IGF-1. So we're confident that it was a well done assay. Those sport players who eventually went on to win their sporting competition already had higher IGF-1 values both before the game as well as after the game. In the game, winning or losing the game, we used as a proxy for social dominance. Sports psychologists know very well and have known for a long time that more confident, more dominant sports players more often win their contests. What we found, we just did a simple t-test here. The means of the IGF-1 levels, this was before the game for these 55 versus 46 individuals. The statistical p-value was 0.04. Whether you like or don't like statistical p-values, that is a statistically significant difference between these two values. The eventual winners already had higher IGF-1. IGF-1 is not only a growth hormone, IGF-1 is also a regulator of mood and social confidence. IGF-1 is given to people who have clinical depression in order to improve their mood. So a significant difference. So here we have, unfortunately, a loser is crying, a winner biting the gold medal. We know today a great deal of research has been done since 2015 when we published these results, how the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which regulates stress responses, interacts with the growth hormone insulin-like growth factor 1 axis. The two are intimately connected. More stress hormones, such as cortisol, means less growth hormones, such as GH and IGF-1. Professor Bloom kindly loaned me this slide that shows factors that influence IGF-1. IGF-1 is the most important regulator of growth and height. It works directly on cells, for instance, in the growth plate. You saw growth plates in the previous presentation about how children grow and assessing bone age. IGF-1 influences those cells directly. More growth hormone stimulates more IGF-1. So anything in green is stimulatory, anything in red is inhibitory. Insulin, thyroid hormones, and androgens, so-called male hormones, stimulate IGF-1, and so-called female hormones, which are also found in men, estrogens, inhibit IGF-1. So men, for instance, or women who have more estrogen hormone production for various reasons, illness or whatever the reason, grow less. That's well known. Malnutrition inhibits IGF-1 production. Of course, malnourished children don't grow well. And also higher immune system activity from any kind of pathogen inhibits IGF-1 production. So illness and infection, we know, results in poor growth and growth stunting. genetics plays a role here as well. Some people just produce more than others. Acute stress,
I beg your pardon,
short-term
sir.
stress stimulates IGF-1, but chronic stress, that toxic, yes.
Sir, we are 2 minutes
Out of
away for
time?
the next
Yeah.
presentation. Yes, please.
Yes, I know, 2 minutes. I'm just about done. Chronic stress that we've been talking about inhibits IGF-1. Exercise comes bouncing in, that promotes IGF-1. So all the things in green are good. What if you're always part of the winning team? That's what our article about winning and losing in IGF-1 is really about. If you're always part of the winning team or community, you're always part of the dominant, politically favored group, what effect does that have on height? Well, we know from throughout history, the favored classes have always been, on average, taller. So this brings me to the end. You can find out more about Sp factors and how they regulate growth in the new edition of my book, Patterns of Human Growth, which fortunately took an image for the cover, which should be familiar to all of you in India, and nicely shows growth and the importance of growth to the dynamics of the human body. I just love the way the girls are moving, even in this still picture, with their different heights and different styles of carrying on their heads. So this is the end. Thank you very much. And again, I hope to see you all in person, perhaps.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much, Professor Barry Balkin. We had a very informative lecture on the interaction between the human biological development and the social, economic, political, and emotional environment, how the individual or communities' material and moral conditions, how social identity and thus motivation can influence growth and other body dimensions. Professor Balkin talks about growth taking place within the phenotypic frame, where the biosocial environment has considerable influence. He also stressed on the community effect in height hypothesis in terms of dominance versus subordination, and the lens of biocultural plasticity in height. And the variation in height is enormous, where the higher say-paid classes tend to become taller, and the lower say-paid classes tend to become shorter or broader. And he has explained vividly how community social networks can provide positive stimulation for growth, while there are also socially toxic environments that can negatively regulate growth. Thank you so much, Professor Balkin. I really wish that we had time for interaction, but maybe at the end we will request the organizers to give us some time for interaction. Now, the time for the second speaker. We have taken 2 minutes time for the second speaker. So I would request you, Professor Balkin, to kindly stay after the completion of the second speaker. If the organizers allow us, many of us will be having queries, so we may have a time for interaction. And for now, I request the co-chair, Dr. Suniti Yadav, to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Professor Balkin. Thank you, Marissa. Now I would like to welcome our co-chair, Dr. Suniti Yadav. So Dr. Suniti Yadav is an assistant professor in the Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. She currently teaches papers in sports and nutritional anthropology, neuroanthropology, primate biology and behavior, and population studies. Her research interest lies in the areas of public health and epidemiology, omic studies in cardiovascular sciences, neuroscience, and pulmonology. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Sohini, and thank you, Professor Moore, and thank you, Dr. Shivani, for giving me this opportunity. So I'll welcome our next speaker for the session, Dr. Ethany Redso. I hope you're there, ma'am.
Yes, Suniti, I'm there.
All right, thank you. Dr. Ethany Redso is a scientific officer in anthropometry at Sports Authority of India at Bengaluru. And currently she is heading the team of anthropometrists at All India Sports Authority of India. She was awarded PhD from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. And during these years as a tenure at Sports Authority of India, she has maintained an interest in studying the physical growth and maturation in young adult athletes, and sports-specific talent identification among those young athletes, monitoring the effectiveness of diet plan and training plan in elite athletes. She's also a faculty in delivering lectures at various short-term courses and a diploma in sports coaching at Sports Authority of India. And she has published various research articles in international and national journals. So with that, I would welcome you, ma'am, for this lecture. She'll be speaking on anthropometry in sports. And we welcome you again, ma'am. Over to you, Dr. Redso.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction, Dr. Suniti. And thank you so much also to the organizing committee for inviting me to the workshop. It's been an absolute honor. I can see so many familiar faces. So, I mean, like, am I the co-host? Can I share the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, before I start with the presentation, actually, I would like to share my journey in Sai. So I've been associated with Sai for the past 7.5 years, and I would say it has been a wonderful experience working with the athletes. For some of the athletes, actually, I've been part of the journey from the junior to the senior team, and then seeing them actually qualifying for the Olympic, and some of them actually going on to win the medal. Now, I would also like to give an introduction about Sai, as most of you might not be aware of this thing. So Sports Authority of India actually was set up in 1984. Now, over the years, actually, Sai has played a very important role in molding the sporting scenario in India, providing training to elite level athletes, as well as coming up with a number of schemes for the identification and development of young talents to various regional center and training centers spread throughout the country. So altogether, there are national center of excellence scheme, there are 23 in number, and also we have got 67 Sai training center covering 23 sports discipline. Now, before I go a bit serious with the presentation, I would also like to show a glimpse of the Sai Bangla Campus. Now, the Sai Bangla Campus is located in the southern part of India and is actually a hub for training of National Center of Excellence athletes from hockey, Taekwondo, athletics and weightlifting discipline. Besides that, we also cater to the national campers from the hockey and the athletic discipline. So I'll just quickly share a few slides of the campus. Okay, so this is the Taekwondo training hall. So I'll share a video of the sparring also. And this is the weightlifting hall. Okay, just the audio video is not playing actually. Now moving on to the next slide. This is the hockey turf that we have. Now, before I start with the presentation totally on sports, let me give a brief introduction about what anthropometry is. I wouldn't go into detail because my mentor, Professor S.M. Malik, has given a wonderful inaugural speech on that one. So I'll just give a gist of it. Anthropometry, as we all know, deal with a standardized technique of measurement, right? The measurements ranging from height, weight, incorporating circumferences, skin fold measurements, segmental length and breadth, and various other measurements. Now, the application, if you look from the wider perspective, okay, it is used actually to study the evolutionary process, how human beings have evolved over time also, and at the same time, actually, it's used to study the population diversity and designing of clothing and equipment, and not forgetting epidemiology, right? So, but when we look at this cluster, actually, the focus is mostly on health and fitness. And when it comes to designing, actually, the focus is on comfort, safety, and efficiency, which we have, I think, which was discussed in the previous, earlier, the lecture in the morning. Now, coming to sports, the focus is in line with health and fitness too, but there's another factor which plays a very crucial role, that is the performance. Now, coming to the application in sports, as most of the athletes actually join during the adolescent stage, an understanding of the human growth and maturation is very important, especially in terms of understanding the window for trainability. Now, if you go by the definition of trainability, it refers to the responsiveness of the developing individuals to the training stimulus at various stages of growth and maturation, as described by Bailey. Now, during this during this adolescent stage, again, there is one major changes which take place in the body, known as the major stage which take place, known as the adolescence growth spurt, where drastic changes take place. Okay, it is actually triggered by various hormones, some of which has been discussed by Professor Barry Boggin in his previous lecture. So I wouldn't be going into detail, but there are two main things which take place during the adolescence growth spurt. One is the peak height velocity and the peak weight velocity. Now, the peak height velocity actually sets in earlier. And again, it varies, the onset of which varies from one individual to the other. Okay, now after the peak height velocity, the peak weight velocity sets in. Okay, which bring about the drastic changes in the overall body composition. So you can see changes, a clear distinction in male and females, where male have got more deposition, more gain of muscle mass and increased bone mineral density, while in female, actually, the gain of muscle mass is also there, but comparatively less than the males. And also, you will observe the deposition of body fat at various strategic places. Okay, so why actually is it important to understand the concept of peak height velocity and peak weight velocity? Because it actually provides an answer for the window of trainability. Now, for any sports, the basis actually lies in speed, strength, agility, and other motor abilities, right? So when you talk about strength, if you go by the definition actually given by Kent, it's an expression of the muscular force. Now, it has actually been shown in studies that in males, the strength increase with advanced chronological age, with peak strength gained at 12 to 18 months after peak height velocity and 9 months after peak weight gain in males. Okay, in female, actually, with the onset of the peak weight velocity. Now, moving again further to the next one, the speed. Okay, if you go by the definition again, it implies an acceleration from a starting point, as described by Sharkey and Gaskill. In males, actually, it developed 12 months before peak height velocity. It reaches the peak at the start of the peak height growth, after which it reaches a plateau. Now, in female, actually, the studies have shown more variation. Also, studies have shown an improved speed with improved neuromuscular function and greater limb length, precisely stride length during peak height velocity. Now, moving again to the next one, the agility. Agility can be defined as a rapid whole body movement with change to velocity or direction in response to an external stimulus, as defined by Shepard and Young. Now, in males, actually, it's similar to speed in agility also. In males, it developed 12 months before peak height velocity. It reaches the peak at the start of the peak height growth, after which it reaches a plateau. In female, the variation actually is more. The studies have shown more variation in females. Also, studies have also shown that the males, especially males at pre-peak height velocity who do specific training, showed better improvement because of neural adaptation to specific training. Now, why is it important to understand the concept of adolescence growth spurt? Especially, it helps to identify, for an athlete, it helps to identify the sensitive period of accelerated adaptation to training and also injury prevention. See, if we are actually aware for the onset of the peak height velocity and peak weight gain, proper training can be implemented. Otherwise, chances of injury, especially in athletes where damages to the growth plate or ACL injury is actually very common. We are talking about the adolescence athlete in here. Now, moving a bit to the elite level athlete, the focus more or less is on nutrition and performance. Now, if you look at the nutrition and the performance, one of the major parameters actually that we go for is the body composition analysis. Now, the body composition analysis, the basic parameters such as, under this, again, the basic parameters such as the overall body fat percentage and the muscle mass or the lean mass, okay, are very important for implementation of the diet plan and training plan. Now, if we talk about training plan, to be more specific, if I think somebody is drawing in there, is the the slide visible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
somebody is
ma'am.
actually just drawing me the slide, so I don't know who did that. So, okay, so if you look at the report on the right side, you will see actually the body composition parameter, the overall, okay, which is generally given actually for implementation in the diet plan. And then below that, actually, you will see the segmental analysis also. Now, this segmental analysis plays, I think is very important when you are going for target specific training in athletes. Now, this actually coupled with the circumference measurement. Now, there are some of the circumference measurement, which if it's visible, actually, you can see the circumference of the thigh, which is 1 centimeter gluteal, okay, the mid thigh and above patella. Actually, this is something which you have just experimented on the circumference. It's, you will find in the text actually. So we have taken actually the circumference like ranging from 5 to 10 centimeter above the patella, okay, and then the right and the calves. The right and the left calf circumference, if it's visible there. Now, this circumference actually, along with the mass, give you a lot of idea about the athlete. For example, those athletes I've seen like undergoing rehabilitation, like with ACL injury and all, how they actually come back, okay, how the progression is. This circumference coupled with the segmental analysis of the lean mass, okay, gives a lot of idea about the progression of the athlete. Not only that, you can correlate it further with the biomechanics parameters such as force and power. Okay, so this actually we have just experimented on with my one of my colleagues from Bangalore. So it provides a lot of information. Now, if you look at the proportion base, Proportion analysis mostly I feel gives a lot of idea about the advantages in certain sports. Okay, for example, if you take the volleyball player, the preference would obviously be a person who is actually taller, right? But besides that, another thing that we have to look into is the sitting height. Now, if the sitting height is actually less, the center of gravity obviously will be towards the higher side. Okay, now again, the leg length ratio is also very important. Now, if the femur length is more than the tibia, then the stress on the knee will be more, chances of injury will be more. Okay, so all this factor also has to be looked into. Another thing is like, especially this is also one which we have experimented. Now, especially in the arm length, when we consider the arm length, you have got the upper arm and the forearm, right? Now, it has been actually seen that athletes who have got longer forearm, okay, they're able to hit the ball with more torque. Torque is nothing but a rotational force, okay? And they're able to hit the ball at sharper angles also. Now, hip with another thing which we had looked into is like an athlete actually, especially in games like where agility and all this thing is more of an importance. Okay, if the hip is actually toward the wider side, and the reaction time is also affected, it's a bit slower. Okay, now in volleyball also, I mean, I will be focusing mostly on the volleyball here. So it has been seen in studies, like especially the length of the Achilles tendon, okay, especially in elite volleyball players in China, they have been found to have longer Achilles tendon, which is directly correlated with better standing vertical jump and longer contact time. Okay, that means they're able to generate more power. Now, other thing, if I go for specific talent identification base, it's like when we talk about weight category sports. So in weight category sports such as Taekwondo, okay, if you go towards the lower weight category sports, the proportion is completely different from that of the higher weight category sports. Now, in the low weight category sports, the idea for talent selection, mostly in the current scenario, is like they go for the proportion base. Okay, they prefer an athlete having a medium shoulder and a medium hip. Okay, with with a stature actually which is a bit above the average. Okay, and then especially in terms of like female athletes, they prefer having, as mentioned, especially in terms of females having a medium to narrower hip actually, because as I mentioned, it's a bit correlated again with a reaction time here. So if you have got a wider hip, actually it affects a lot of the skill base, especially the kicks and all, because since you have to lift your leg, okay. So these are some of the parameters actually that we'll look into. Now, for most of the recommendation actually that we give on the athlete. Now, if you look at most of the literature in sports, actually, you'll see there is a range given for body fat percentage, but you won't find a range for muscle mass. Because what I feel is like, from my own personal experience over the years, actually, I've seen even having the range of the body fat percentage, and in fact, actually finding the optimum of the athlete, okay, to be in that particular range, actually, to be in the particular, to be precise, to be in that particular score, it takes a lot of time to understand that. And not only that, in terms of muscle mass also, how much should be the optimum muscle mass for the athlete, okay, depending again on the sports discipline, depending again on the proportion, it has to be individualized, and it actually again takes a bit of observation. Okay, so these are certain things actually that I've seen, based on my experience inside. Now, if you look at the power sports, you will find the power sports representation mostly from the northeastern part of India, right? For example, weightlifting and all I'm talking about in here. If you go to the endurance-based sport, you will find a representation mostly for the northern part of India, say from UP, from Rajasthan, from Haryana. And even if you look at the hockey, the Olympic team that we have, okay, the midfield position mostly come from the northeastern part of India, from Orissa, Uttarakhand. Okay, the forward and the defense mostly from the UP region, the UP Punjab region and Haryana. So I feel ki as an anthropologist, one of our forte being like, based on population-based studies, I feel we can contribute a lot for a country in terms of like making it as one of the sporting nation by contributing more to it, because we don't have much data on that one when it comes to population-based talent identification. So that's all for my talk. And towards the end, actually, what I feel is it's not actually that working with an Olympic team, but I feel it's part of the journey actually that you share, which, cheers you up, and the appreciation actually that you get from the athletes is what matters at the end. So with that, actually, I would like to close. Thank you so much for hearing.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that wonderful talk. And your talk has really provided us good insights into as why these aspects of physiology should be covered and physique should be covered by training for athletics, and how anthropometry can be used in sports. And probably a wider domain of this would be where when we would be able to apply other techniques of these variation analysis, such as in genetics. Say, for example, there is an ACE gene that helps us determine, kind of endurance and power in human beings. So that can, if that could be applied further, I think our young researchers can take a lesson from ma'am's lecture and they can carry forward the work. And thank you once again, ma'am. And I'll hand it over to Sohini now for any question and answers that we have in the chat box.
Yeah, so I have a question for Professor Bogan. So is Professor Bogan there? Yeah, hello, sir. So we have a question.
I'm here.
Yes, we have a question from Deboshmita Banerjee. So she's working on a comparatively small population, that is a sample size of 1500. So she wants to ask you, if I want to observe the factors of slow growth of the population, what variable should I consider apart from biological parameters like height or weight and income of the family?
Yes, I saw that question in the chat, and I did respond. But let me say that first I would have to know more about the population to know what variables are available. But certainly you want to begin to assess how the different people, are these all these 1500 are all children?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So you want to know something about their families and their social position in the hierarchy of the community, so of course you want to know something about the socioeconomic status of their parents, education and occupation. But what we've been doing, we've been working with some colleagues in North Bengal and West Bengal, and also in Sikkim. In particular, Dr. Binu Dorjio, who is participating today, has been working with populations, and we've been using more community effect variables about position in the social hierarchy to better understand growth variation in communities of very short-statured individuals. So I suggested in a direct reply to get in touch with Binu, and he could explain more about both what variables are collected and some newer statistical methods that are being used to analyze the variables. Our team has developed a newer technique called St. Nicholas House analysis. It's named after St. Nicholas of Santa Claus, but it has nothing to do with Santa Claus. It has to do with how we use hierarchical correlations to better understand causation in these very complicated social, economic, political, and emotional growth variables. So I hope that helps. But of course, you can also get in touch with me more directly by email. My email is very easy to find if you Google my name at loughborough.ac.uk. And I'll be happy to discuss this more with you and your students.
Thank you, Professor. So I guess that helps Deboshmita. So we have one more question from Atriya Nyogi. She says that my query is that the stress inherited from parents in case of monozygotic twins will have equal effect on growth in both the twins.
Oh, that's a very good question. Monozygotic twins, of course, in principle are genetically identical, but right from the moment that the two individuals begin to form, at whatever point the original fertilized ovum separates and becomes two individuals, they begin to experience life differently. We know that placentation is not necessarily equal in monozygotic twins. And not many, but there are several studies showing that the twin who gets a larger share of the placenta grows bigger, taller than the twin who gets a smaller percentage. So about stress, I don't know of any studies that have been done looking at the stress, for instance, stress the mother experiences during pregnancy and how that affects monozygotic twins. That would be a tremendously important area of research to begin. I just don't know of any studies. There may be, but I don't think so.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have a question from Professor Aurup ARB. So can we have Aurup, sir?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Bogan. Myself is Aurup from University of Calcutta, and I have been honored that Slawomir Quezel and Michael Harmonussen has invited me for the last soiree in 20th November because of a kind of meeting with Michael in the Bishop Bharati, and we find some kind of interesting collaborating point. So I'm writing my proceedings, what I have given, because Professor Elena Godina was there as a author of this one, and Professor Christian Gett. I enjoyed thoroughly the whole situation, but I missed you, however, because from Professor Michael Harmonussen, I find your name very much. So the same thing what I asked or humble suggestion to Michael Harmonussen and everybody. So right now, whether we are able to say about the bioculture, or when the genomic imprinting is there, we know about epigenetics. So can we just make a separate of biological and cultural connotations in case of evolution? Because a long back, we have started this word with the bio-culture. So how much we can have this particular thing too much that we are going out, because you can understand that when you write a paper on the bioculture, mostly the answers are... That's all right.
Sorry,
sir, you may continue.
Sorry.
Yes, sir, you may continue.
So when we write a paper or a kind of decision giving or like a seminar, we always give the answer from the biological side. So less it is taken by the cultural anthropologists to give some kind of answers, that we always try to make a kind of bioculture with menarche, Say, for instance, the birth weight, you have given good examples of this. The birth weight, what we find that if you control the whole prenatal cares and everything, I mean, socio-demographic features, social hierarchy. So what we find, this is my observation, what we find that the male birth weight is always significantly higher than the female birth weight. If you control all the situations, so might be the genetics, so there are stories of Y chromosome, higher androgen, I mean, later maturation, might be that there are a lot many stories. But still, when the genomic imprinting is there, we know about, by and large, we know about these methylations and these expressions of the genes. And rightly pointed out somebody about the twins. Really, the twins are very important in this to find it out what is the heritability. So more and more things are coming. So I'm not going to repeat this kind of things. There are some kind of applications in the gene culture models, and what we said, what you said about the evolution of prestige. So this has already been started, okay? And also there is important thing which is called Baldwin effect, right? The Baldwin effect was there in 1896, right? It
Yes.
was a neurodevelopmentary, yes, neurodevelopmentary, and it is just in between the Lamarckism and the Darwinism, that whether your character, I mean, which you acquire this characters is going to the germ cell or not. So this is very interesting that I find on the Baldwin effect. So I have a talk with Professor Michael Harmonison. I have sent all the papers to him, and I found an also somatic pathway to the cultures that was written by Fuller in 1915 and published in Human Biology Wednesday. So there are so many things that are very interesting, and right now in biology and the interaction of the culture, and as well as my topic was that on the SWERI, the biological anthropology, the interface with the social and cultural anthropology. So I tried to make some kind of things, and I tried to give what we have done in our with our team in Calcutta University and what is our newer vision. So just a kind of observation in your, and I really enjoyed Professor Bogan. I have no that kind of relation, I mean, collaboration with you or a kind of paper and other kind of thing. So I am there in the Google, you can search it out, and you can find my academic profile in my University of Calcutta website in anthropology. So I request you just go through, and might be in future we can have some collaborative studies. And in this particular condition, I really very much sad, you know, that you talked about North India. So there is Professor Joydeep Sen, who was has a very, I mean, untimely sad demise. You know, he was very much potential, and and the supervisor of Binu, I guess. And you have been there in for a long time for the field work, and he was academically and personally is very much close to me. However, because he is also the alumni of Calcutta University, and really there are a lot many things that we can talk, and I am again very much privileged that Professor Harmonison has given me an invitation for the next very in June 2021, might be in Poland again.
Yes.
So I do not know that whether I can go over there, but still I don't know what would be the situation, pandemic situations and other, but I'm really looking forward if we can meet personally than virtually in this particular condition. So I was really, your talk was so thought provoking. There are so many matters to discuss. I feel the time is very short, that, and also I'm very much grateful to Professor Murray that have given me some time, and Sohini, and also Suniti for giving me for some time to interact.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
This,
sir. Yeah.
this is really an interesting point. I was listening because in the late I started, I could not have as a Professor Malik, and he's so much I blessed with Professor Malik and all people from the University of Delhi because of my frequent visit to the University of Delhi. And
Thank
just
you.
I'm
Thank you
coming
so
to
much, sir,
the,
for being there.
thank you.
Professor
Thank
Berry,
you.
your response, please.
Well, thank you very, very much. I did see your
Just a
presentation.
moment, just a moment.
Please, yeah,
I
yeah.
would like
Okay,
to
okay.
continue with the next speaker too. I mean, the last speaker that from Sai, cannot, I could not pronounce. I feel that I have a talk with her because one of my student, PhD student, Dr. Priyanka Das, was for some time in the Sai, Bangalore, and I have a phone call with her. Might be if she can recognize me.
Yes,
So,
sir.
yes, thank
Yeah,
you so much for recognizing me. But that was a phone call, not in the virtual anyway.
exactly.
So, yes. So, just as
Sir, actually, you're muted.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes. The thing is this, if you can just add up for your next seminar, that in anthropometry, we are thinking to make some kind of workstation design, which is called ergonomics. This is also a good area for the anthropometry because, you know, statures and other kind of things are very much important for workstation designs in the transport, because India is a multi-ethnic country having a dimensional morphology. So this is very much important. Thank you so much, Professor Murray and everybody. Professor
Thank you, sir.
Bogin,
Thank you.
I talked a lot, so I feel that we will have discussion later on through the emails and other.
Right. Now we will give some time to Professor Bogin, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was present at that soiree, as we call that, research meeting in Poland last month, and I did hear your talk, Arup, and thank you very much. I do also look forward to meeting you in person one day, and I'm glad you were so thoroughly enjoyed my talk. I also enjoyed yours. So,
yes, sir. Absolutely, honestly.
Yeah, so we have a question from Dr. Suniti Yadav. Ma'am, you may take over.
Professor Bogin, my question is to you on a lighter side. Now that you said you talked about methylation and inheritance and hereditary of performance and all. So do we really anticipate when these traits are really programmed in utero? Do we really anticipate or hypothesize that children of maybe grandchildren of these sports people who are good performers at sports, do they really inherit those traits when they are programmed in utero?
Oh, that's a good question. I have no idea, because we studied university students who are elite athletes. I have no idea if they will go on to have any children, and I have no idea if their experience in sport will have any epigenetic effects on their babies. Certainly, sports, we know that in elite sport performance, you have to practice and train, but there's also a genetic component. I do some bicycling, and I know some elite bicyclists, and they just, why do they come super elite? Well, partly because of genetics. Their VO2 max, their maximum oxygen utilization is just greater than some other bicyclists who train just as hard, but just can't get to that level of oxygen utilization. So there is a genetic component, and I'm sure these elite athletes we studied, if they do have children, will pass on some of those characteristics to their babies, but the babies will have to train very, very, very hard to also become elite athletes. So the epigenetics, though, I just don't know if anyone has done those studies to see if participation in sports has epigenetic effects on the next generation.
Thank you, Professor Bogin.
You're welcome.
Now, Mohini, I think we do not have any more questions further. But I would request everyone, if anybody, Professor Murray, with your permission, I would request anyone who has any comments or anyone who wishes to share experiences about this workshop here. Professor Murray, if you permit, sir.
Please, carry on, please.
Okay, so I don't think anybody has any experiences as of now, but probably they might write it in the chat box.
Yeah.
So once again,
Ma'am, one hand.
okay, we have Dr. Jocelyn Charles here with us. He would want to say something. So,
Please unmute.
Dr. Charles, you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Professor Gary, my question is, some sport like gymnastics, the athlete reached to their high performance before their maturity, physical maturity. For example, you quoted earlier questions like Nadia Comaneci, and most of the gymnastics, they reach the physical performance, the peak performance before their actual maturity, bone maturity or physical maturity. And in that case, how can we wait for the expected height and all? What could be done in those cases where the performance demands in early age? And one more related question is that we sometimes refer a word called early burnout. The junior athletes perform high in their international or national competitions, and later on the performance comes down. What could be the reason for all of this?
Those are excellent questions. I did that one study where we happened to take blood samples from athletes, but sports performance is not my area of research. I think Professor Singh would be much better qualified to address your specific questions. Certainly with the early, the young athletes in gymnastics, from what I understand, that has a great deal, of course, to do with body proportions and body composition, and many of the changes during adolescence and just after adolescence decrease performance in gymnasts because of body proportions, leg length, the stature, and muscle to fat ratios, things like that. But again, it's not my precise area of expertise. I do know that at the elite level of gymnastic performance, there's often interventions to delay maturation even more than would be biologically expected. In other words, there's cheating with drugs and things like that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Any other query from the participants?
Because sorry, I think I was muted. I said Professor Singh would better answer those questions.
We heard it, sir.
Oh, okay.
We heard it. Yes. Is there any other query from the participants? Because we still have time. We still have 15 minutes left. We can continue with the discussion, and we can take questions from both the speakers. Yes, please.
So may I, Professor Murray?
Right.
Just it's not a question to anybody, but it's a kind of humble suggestion. The question from Dr. Suniti Jadhav about this epigenetic study. So recently, I have already talked in this very that there is a paper published in 2016 itself. It's a genomoid association studies of 74 loci associated with the educational attainment, right? So many of the people has taken whether this is educational attainment, but what I think in case of India, education is an opportunity, right? So how much you get the opportunity to have your higher education, it's not like the other, because it's a lower middle income country, and this is not a higher income country. So whatever the education you want that you cannot take in India, but still I think that this is a kind of learning, because there are some kind of people in the world who have very quick learning ability. So it is going on from the evolution of the man, the quick learning ability. So we can have this kind of study, not in case of the educational attainment, but this epigenetic studies, when we have a kind of technique to identify the methylation and the acetylation with some kind of genetic content. Basically, we can go with the chromosome telomeres and other kind of things. So I feel that this is the time that we can equip ourselves and give a better answer by the younger generation, and we too, the older generation, will be there with our experience that we are not really in position to do the work in the laboratory itself, but the younger generations are there. They can be staying in the laboratory for a long time, and they can stand on and working. So we are the older generation, so only we can give our ideas and the humble suggestion. That's it. So I feel that everybody will be there for the sake of anthropology. So I feel that's the kind of suggestion that to Dr. Suniti Jadhav, that if you want, I can send you the link of the paper, or the PDF is with me that I can send you for a learning.
Thank you, sir, for the suggestions. I think there are no more queries.
Sir, can I just add something to
Please.
Dr. Suniti on a lighter note only? So in India, actually, we have PV Sindhu, right? Whose parents actually are both national level volleyball player, just for the information, on a lighter note. So, and replying to Dr. Joslet Charles, if I pronounce it correctly, actually. So if you look at the gymnasts, they mostly fall under the late maturing category. So, sir, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so most of the gymnasts actually, they are late mature only, sir. If you go by the literature. So that's all I would like to add.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other query or suggestions before we close?
Sohini, can you just read out the congratulatory messages?
Yeah, sure. So thank you. I would like to thank the speakers, Professor Barry Bogan, Dr. Ethany Redso. Yeah, I would like to thank Professor Murray and Dr. Suniti Yadav for chairing and co-chairing this session. And finally, I would like to invite Shivani Chandil, Dr. Shivani Chandil, to give a vote of thanks.
I can see many congratulatory messages in the chat box. I assume our audience is very shy. They are themselves not saying anything, but they are writing, so that we can read it. And the workshop was basically for students. I mean, the participants were majorly students. So it would have been like very enriching and learning experience for all of you. And now we have proceeded towards the end of this international workshop. And I cannot end it before thanking so many people who were behind the success of this workshop. Starting with, I would, firstly and foremost, I would like to thank our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor P.C. Joshi. So when the whole idea was conceived about celebrating the 75 glorious years, we completed it in July. And sir was acting VC at that time, and he was like, after our lives, that you all should do something. And we have immense treasure of faculty members. We have great faculty, and everybody specializes in different fields, and they are doing pioneer work in their own fields. So everybody decided to do something related to their own field. And then because of the kind of push, the kind of encouragement I received from our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor P.C. Joshi, I conceived this idea of a workshop on KINANTHROPOMETRY and human welfare. We have a laboratory also here, KINANTHROPOMETRY, ergonomics, and physiological anthropology. And we have been working in this area. And on occupational health also we are working. So firstly, I would like to thank sir that he encouraged us to conceive these kind of very, very informative and very enriching workshops, seminars, seminar lectures throughout the year. So we would be doing it till next year, July, we would be conducting these kind of events. And secondly, I would like to thank our head of the department, Professor MP Sachdeva, and also the convener of the workshop. He provided all kind of freedom, all kind of support, everything that, okay, Shivani, you carry out whatever you find is appropriate, you please carry on. So I would like to thank him. Thirdly, I would like to thank our faculty members who were always there, be it any kind of technical support, any kind of academic support, they were emotional support, they were always there. And in our inaugural address, everybody was there to support this workshop. And I would also like to thank our chief guest, which I've already thanked, but he was my mentor, and he is someone who introduced this field in our department, Professor S.L. Malik. So he graced the occasion by being by giving the inaugural address. Thank you so much, sir. And but any event or any workshop or conference, if we talk about, is incomplete without our distinguished speakers. Because if speakers are not, I mean, they are not good, or I mean, they are not, I mean, they are not experienced, or they, it is something, the most valuable part of the workshop or any seminar are these speakers. And I'm very, very lucky, and I consider myself very fortunate that I got to know some of the speakers I already knew, but some speakers I got to know through this workshop, and they were so kind and generous and very, very supportive. The moment I sent them the email and they got to know about the workshop, they immediately agreed. So I am really, really thankful to all my speakers, Professor Patria Hume and Dr. Anup Adhikari, Professor Elena Godina, Professor Sp Singh, Professor Barry Boggin, and Dr. Ethany Redso. All of you, without you, this workshop would not have been a success. Thank you so much for joining us and enriching our this experience. This workshop was great success because of you all. And it was difficult for me. We were having a lot of breaks because it was difficult for me to arrange the there was the difference of the time zone, and it was a little bit difficult to arrange the lectures. Smoothly. There was some kind of breaks we needed, and I hope all of us meet and have these kind of workshop or conferences in offline mode. And my question to all of you will be, like, when are you all coming to Delhi? So sooner this pandemic is over, all of us can meet, and we can enjoy each other's company, and the kind of discussion we have during breakfast and during lunch, those discussions are very, very beautiful. So we are missing on that. I would also like to thank my workshop coordinators, Miss Kirti Rao Chonsing, Miss Chonsing Simra, Sarika, without whom they prepared the brochure, they prepared the posters, they prepared the abstract book in very short period of time. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank my Zoom coordinators, Mr. Arun Singh and Kivingu and Amarjeet, for coordinating these sessions, because we are in department, but it is very difficult to manage all these things alone. Without their help, this workshop would not have been coordinated so brilliantly. Thank you so much for, and I have forgot Miss Sohini Sinha. She was also there. I'm sorry, I forgot. She was there, and throughout this Zoom coordination. I would also like to thank my chairs and co-chairs and moderators for the workshop. They gave their time and their valuable suggestions during the course of this workshop. Thank you so much. And I would also like to thank our research seminar group for their constant support, and the teachers involved in the research seminar group. Thank you to all of them. Actually, our faculty members are very, very supportive, whether they are from social anthropology, they are from physical anthropology or archaeological anthropology. All of them are very supportive. You just name workshop and they will tell you, okay, this kind of suggestion. So they all are very, very supportive. I'm lucky to be in this department, University of Delhi. And thank you all. But last but not the least, our participants. Thank you for this overwhelming response. Thank you very much. Thank you for this overwhelming response. Like the moment I put this poster on, I got so many registrations. Some of the, because in online these days, we don't see that much of participation. I mean, in some of these specific workshops, like if it is a common theme, but if we do conduct something on biological anthropology, so many people will come. But if it is specific, then it caters to the specific needs and specific, it caters to different audience. So for that, continuously the kind of response I got from the participants, it was very good. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us here. I hope next time when I host this kind of workshop, we all meet in offline mode and share lunches and teas together. And especially our speakers who are not from, I mean, who are not in India, Professor Elena, Professor Barry, Professor Petria, who might, it is night, she might be sleeping now. So thank you so much for joining us. I wish all of you a very good health and lots of love from India to Indians and to the people who have joined us. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you. And thank you to the very dynamic organizer, Dr. Shivani Chandal.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
It would have been incomplete without you.
Thank you, Professor Balkin. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, ma'am.
Thank you, Suniti.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Good luck.
Take care of your
Stay
health.
healthy.
Take care of your health.
Good health.
Yes, thank you, Elena.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Love you. Bye.
Okay, I can see nobody is leaving this meeting.
I'll go and cook dinner for my husband.
No, Elena, please take care. We will be in touch.
Thank you. Love you. Thank you. Thank you, Shwani.
Take care.
Great.
Bye from us.
Congratulations again. Bye. Bye now.
Thank you all for joining this meeting, and we are ending the session now. Thank you for your support and your encouragement. I hope this experience was enriching for all of you.